Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda retrospective podcast. I'm your host, Lyndon Willoughby, joined as always by my co-host, Matt Willoughby, for the final time in Season 9 of this show. Moving on to a new season next week. Got a really fun epilogue episode, I think you could call it, to round out our discussion of Phantom Hourglass. Going to be a really great time. Matt, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. It is the return of football season, finally. And you did drag me away from the Cowboys' first game of the season, which has been going exceptionally well this evening. But I'm happy to be here to talk about Zelda.
Man, I'm surprised. I didn't know that was happening. And I'm surprised that you gave me absolutely no guff whatsoever about it. Like, not even a slight offhand.
Well, I mean, the only other option was tomorrow, which is our grandmother's funeral. So... no guff to be given.
Yeah, I don't want to do it tomorrow.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, Cowboys.
Between the two things, I
guess I'm not really going to apologize because you say they're winning. So the question that I have for you is, have you ever considered the fact that maybe they only win when you're not watching?
So I would agree with that, except I did watch most of the first quarter while I was at mom and dad's, and during that they were playing excellently. It's almost the end of the third quarter now, and they're winning 33-0. So, I think it was a good start while I was there, and they continued on the steamrolling that has been happening.
Yeah, but just think, if you had watched the whole thing front to back, it could have ended in calamity. Could have all been your fault.
Sure, why not? Why not?
I'm happy for you and for Cowboys fans everywhere. Unless, of course, they, bungle a 33-point lead.
That would be historic.
Yeah.
And awful.
So
it would be bad.
Yeah, fingers crossed, knock on wood. I'm pulling for you, Cowboys, because I feel like I have no other choice. I was raised here.
It's true. You don't have a choice.
The fandom is holding me hostage. We're not here to talk about football. And
we hardly ever talk about sports in general.
We don't.
It's very rare.
I'm happy we got a little aside in there, add some diversity to the conversation lineup. What we are here to talk about is The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. And as I said, we're going to be having a very interesting format for that discussion. I am actually not even going to be the one who's moderating most of the episode.
I was going to say, with your intro, I was about to say, but are you the host? Because you're not.
I was going to say,
we need to do the Captain Phillips meme. Look at me.
Yeah.
Max is the captain now.
Max is the captain now. And that brings me to my first of several introductions for the evening. You know all the people who are going to be on tonight already, but there's quite a roster who's joining us tonight. So just going to go down the list one at a time. Our interim podcast host who came up with the whole concept for this discussion, the one and only Max Nichols. How you doing, Max?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here talking to some friends for the first time in real time.
Yeah, I think it's funny because Matt and I have talked several times, and I know that we've shared this plan with all of y'all at various points, but we had kind of bounced around the idea of what would it be like to have just a mega episode that serves as kind of a pulling together of all of the various ZU affiliated folks that we have on the show most frequently. And it turns out that is what we're doing tonight. And it just sort of happened that way, and I think it's going to be a stronger episode for it. So, of course, we've got Max. We also welcome onto the show the wonder from down under, Cody Davies himself. How you doing, Cody?
Hello. I'm always glad to be here with these Dallas Cowboys.
That's us, the Dallas Cowboys.
We are them, not the professional football team. We're talking about ourselves.
Yeah,
yes.
when people refer to America's team, they're talking about Matt and I, not the NFL professional football team, the Dallas Cowboys.
You better be careful saying that. Jerry Jones will sue us.
I was gonna say he's listening. Jerry's always listening. Cody, we are incredibly happy to have you on the show tonight. It's been a few weeks. We've caught up with Max and Josh once or twice since we talked to you last, but we've all caught up on Phantom Hourglass in the not too distant past. Shared our commiserations and observations. So definitely happy to have you here to help round out the season. Of course, we couldn't do it without the help of one more excellent individual who is also joining us tonight. You heard it right, ladies and gentlemen. We have not one, not two, but 3 guest hosts on the pod tonight. And dear God help me, I have no idea how this is going to go. But rounding out the Triforce of co-hosts we are bringing to the program is Josh from ZU. Josh, how you doing?
The thing that you waited for to get all of us here was Phantom Hourglass.
He's got a really good point.
Century.
But
He's got a really good point.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, if Phantom Hourglass is a massive black hole, that the gravity well at the center of it drug us all in, and there is no escape. That's the way that I'm looking at it. So yeah, good observation there, Josh. But honestly, just really happy to have all 3 of you on the show. I think that this is going to be a really interesting episode because I've never managed audio from any more than 3 people in one episode before, and so I'm a little terrified right now. But I think it's going to be great. Honestly, like the topic of discussion for the evening is one that I'm really super excited about, and all credit goes to Max for presenting this as an idea. Then Max came to Matt and I and said, "Hey, so this thing we're doing, it actually works better if you have more people." I was like, okay, well, I think I can probably get more people. Should I get more people? I don't know. It's a little scary, but we got more people. We got more people. So we're going to see how it goes. We are going to engage in a professional game design brainstorming activity tonight. And it's going to be a really great time. Max is going to tell us all a little bit more about that here in just a bit. But honestly, what I would like to do is just hit the housekeeping, get it out of the way, and then dive into the meat of this thing, hand it over to Max, and let him guide us through this whole exercise. So with all of that being said, there's my segue. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week, we play a new section of a Zelda game, and then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod and get access to our Discord channel. Listener mail. Vote on what game we play next. Can be Twilight Princess, by the way. Just got done doing that a few weeks ago. And so much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get is that we read their names every week here on the show. Those legendary individuals are Cosmic Link, Jerry, Dante 2, Tom, Gavin, Andy, Stephanie, Billy, Connor, Rachel, Shepherd Street, Matthew, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Kelso, Tiffany the Star, Daxel, Patrice, Stephanie, Darknut, Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Lennon, Melanie, Kolku, Aiden, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Dante 1, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru the Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Ben, Daniel, Nick D_TV, Travis, Hyrule Interviews, aka Max Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals, and I love them all so much that were it feasible to do so, I would have invited them all to participate in the exercise we're going to do tonight.
I don't know about that, Lyndon. That's too many people. I don't know if I can talk to that many people all simultaneously.
I welcome the chaos. Or at least I say that, but I didn't do it. So anyway, fair enough. But in my heart, I think that I would enjoy doing that with all those people. They're wonderful.
In other words, it's a meaningless gesture.
It means something to me. I said a nice thing, Matt. It's like a card. It's like a Hallmark card, right?
Yeah,
it's It's supposed to make you feel warm and fuzzy.
Does
Matt's in his supervillain phase now.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is where like the various personalities start to like unfold, and everyone falls into like a role like during the course of tonight's episode.
I love my role.
And now we know Matt's
the antagonist.
We love that for you, Matt. All right, that brings us to the end of housekeeping. And this is the point of the episode where I turn things over to professional game designer. I don't know if y'all knew that about Max, but he is a professional designer of video games. And he's going to explain to us what we're doing tonight.
Yeah. Okay. So basically what's happening here is I'm adapting. Well, actually, I should say what we're actually doing at a higher level, which is we are redesigning the Temple of the Ocean King for funsies. So kind of for intro here is I'm adapting the kind of formal brainstorming sessions I've had at various points throughout my career, at jobs or in classes. That's kind of a method to generate kind of useful brainstorming with large groups of people. So like the method that I'm adapting, I've used it for like meeting rooms that had 80 people in them before. We didn't go that crazy, obviously, although it sounds like Lyndon might have been up for it if I'd suggested it. So it's going to be somewhat formal. I'm going to be actually using a timer for various parts of this process and cutting us off when the time is up. Partially because we have a lot to get through, and partially because that's just kind of how I know to do this, because that's how it's done at work. It's not exactly how you might see it at my day job. I'm kind of mashing together a couple different things. We're going to start with what is called a post-mortem in the industry, also known as a retrospective. Whenever a game project is done or a major milestone is done, game teams will do a post-mortem, and that's basically where they kind of go over what went well with a project, what didn't go so well and needs to be improved next time. And in an actual game studio, that stuff might include like workflow problems and team interpersonal things. For us, we're only looking at a finished product, which is Phantom Hourglass. So we're going to be looking at what went well and what we didn't think went well in Phantom Hourglass's Temple of the Ocean King. And then the second half of all this, we're going to be brainstorming ways that we might like to see the Temple of the Ocean King concept improved or redone, based on what we talked about in that first half. I do want to give a little disclaimer here. That's the word I'm looking for. Something that we see a lot in the gaming community online, like on YouTube, for instance, is people who will jump in and confidently say like, "Oh, how could the devs miss this? This was easy to tell that this was a problem," or if they had just done this one easy thing, the game would have been better. A lot of people will confidently say stuff about how games should have been made in a better way than what they release as.
I don't know what you're talking about, Max. I have never witnessed this phenomenon in all of my time.
Nor participated
on gaming social media.
No,
not a single time. Yeah.
So I want to be super clear to any professional game devs that are listening that that's not what we're doing right here. This is for fun. We could not possibly know what sort of trade-offs the Phantom Hourglass team actually had to make in the process of building the Temple of the Ocean King. For all we know, like there were major features that were going to make it awesome and they got cut at the last second. Or, they might have had a major part of it that only became playable towards the end of production, and by then it was too late to really adjust. Because a lot of what often happens in game dev is people will come up with a design and it takes months and months and months or years to build it. And then so a lot of game dev is kind of like squinting at the future and trying to imagine how all the pieces are going to come together. And that's how you end up with stuff like games releasing that have obvious flaws. The game devs that release these games, they always know about the flaws. It's never a surprise, really. Usually not, at least. But the way development timelines work is by the time it is clear that something isn't working, it is often too late. So all that is to say, we have the benefit of looking at a finished product. There's no need to imagine things. We have it all in front of us. And we don't need to worry about constraints like time or money in our ideas. We can just have fun with it.
So I did have kind of a question about this because I know that usually an exercise like this would involve conversations around scope and like what is actually feasible and possible for a working team to make happen within a set amount of time. And like obviously I get it. We don't want to constrain the fun of this exercise too much by getting bogged down in like real life minutia and logistics. But I am kind of curious. Do we have any kind of system in place for limiting like sky's the limit, kitchen sink sort of suggestions? Or
we're not really going to have any system for that in this brainstorming session. This kind of brainstorming typically happens early in development for like a new release or feature. And it's actually specifically important to not hold ourselves back based on scope or feasibility. Because even if a crazy idea is thrown out there in a brainstorming session that sounds impossible, it might lead to further ideas that are possible. Or it might be one of those things where it sounds impossible at first, and then someone says, wait a second, but what if we did this? And then it's like, oh, actually it was feasible if you just looked at it a different way. So at work, when we're doing brainstorming like this, we're actually like, if someone says, oh, that's out of scope, we'll be like, doesn't matter. Don't worry about it right now. We don't care if it's in scope or not. That's a problem someone will figure out afterwards.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense to me.
I like that. Let the creativity flow and then pare it down after the fact. Don't restrict creativity.
Yeah. One thing that's worth mentioning is that what we'll come out with at the end of this process isn't necessarily a single polished idea that all fits together. We will probably come out of it with a set of ideas that may or may not even go together. And in a real game dev situation, what would then happen is the designer who owns it, who's owning the feature or whatever, or is in charge of making a pitch, will take these ideas and figure out how to fit them together. Like that might be a creative director if it's a whole project, or it might be, a designer if it's like something smaller, like a single mission. So we're not necessarily going to have a fleshed out design that is all watertight and stuff at the end of this.
Okay, cool.
But we will have a bunch of fun ideas.
Good disclaimer. I like that. I like Matt. Matt, I think that, I think that phrase you just dropped can be our slogan for this entire activity. Let the creativity flow.
Yeah.
We're embracing it.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And obviously there's going to be a lot of editing that's going to be happening in here. This exercise in real life requires long periods of silence when people are kind of brainstorming and dropping stuff in this board. So we will be editing that out, and we will also be doing as good a job as we can of vocalizing the ideas that are being presented for the enjoyment of our listeners, because I feel like y'all's ability to follow what we're doing here is actually pretty crucial to this being a good episode of podcast.
On that note, I should describe what we're all looking at. I've had everyone sign up for a whiteboard program called Miro. And it's kind of just like a shared canvas that people can write in or paste images into or put little virtual sticky notes on. And we're going to be looking at this as we do some of the brainstorming steps. But we will be summarizing what we're seeing as we go through it all. And there will be periods of time where everyone gets to talk. I realize I'm kind of taking over all of the airspace right now. Josh and Cody, you guys will get your turns. And I suppose on that note, we can kind of get into it.
I do think unless this is a part of the structure that you were just gonna slip in at some point, and if that's the case, then let me know, Max. But I think it might be a good idea to start this whole conversation off with just a quick summary of our general thoughts about what the Temple of the Ocean King currently is as they sort of evolved throughout this season of Sacred Realms. I know people have been listening and everything, and I don't think it's much of a secret. But I do think it might be good to just start the conversation off that way with like, hey, here's what the Temple of the Ocean King currently is, and here's what we thought about it.
Yeah, we can actually get into that part of it as part of the post-mortem step.
Beautiful.
All right, fantastic. So I'm going to start off by putting forth my best guess as a game designer at the 4 creative goals that they had with the Temple of the Ocean King. Odds are pretty good I'm not getting it correct. They probably had a different creative process than this. But looking at it from the outside, this is what I think they were trying to achieve with the Temple of the Ocean King in Phantom Hourglass. So goal number 1, recording information is useful. They wanted players to feel an incentive to record information with their stylus by drawing on the map. And they wanted to create like situations where that was important, or pressure where players needed to do that, or places where it would be more optimal to record information and refer to it later. So that's goal number 1. Goal number 2 is Temple of the Ocean King is an experience where it is satisfying to attain mastery through repeat play. So this is kind of the speedrunner part of it, right? Where like you play it over and over again and get better each time. And like that's a satisfying experience to redo the same content and feel yourself improving every time you do it. I believe that was a second goal. Goal number 3 is for tension that the player is feeling to increase as the player goes deeper into the temple. So, floor 1, there's a certain amount of tension. Floor 3, there's more tension, and et cetera, until by the time you're at the deep floors, like you are feeling a lot of tension. Goal number 4, and this is the last one that we're going to worry about, is that it felt like a new kind of experience for a Zelda game. It didn't just feel like a normal dungeon. It didn't just feel like a normal overworld. In some fashion, it was a new kind of experience for players within the context of the Zelda series. So when we're going over the postmortem, actually, let me look at my notes here real quick. Yeah, so that's what I believe the 4 development goals are. We could probably come up with more, but we don't have time to do more than 4. So those are the top 4.
And we are observing those development goals in our own exploration of this thing, right? Like
Yeah. Okay. So we are going to use those goals as our North Star. Like when we're evaluating how well the Temple of the Ocean King did, we're going to be evaluating it against those goals. Like, do we think they succeeded on those goals or not? And in what ways did they succeed or not? And then when we get to the brainstorm section later on, I'll restate the goals then again, but we will be brainstorming ways that they could reach those same goals better.
Beautiful.
Any questions from the room before I start the first part of the postmortem?
So when we have when we're making little notes and stuff on what went well, etc., do we have to tie that back to one of the goals, or can we just miscellaneously put stuff?
You can just miscellaneously put stuff. Yeah, so for the listeners, what Cody's asking about is on this whiteboard, I've basically created 2 big boxes, and one is labeled what went well, and one is labeled not so well. And then it has a bunch of little boxes in it, which look like sticky notes that we can type in. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to put a 5-minute timer on, and I'm going to say, we're brainstorming what went well. And we're going to be quiet for 5 minutes. We're not going to chatter because we don't want to influence each other too much, as if we didn't all just listen to the same season of the podcast.
Right.
But we'll pretend we're not influencing each other at least. And then after the 5 minutes is up, we will stop being quiet and we will go on to the next segment. And we'll do some voting and stuff. Any other questions?
I think that we should all start this exercise by claiming a Post-it note color so that we can keep track of things easily.
Brilliant.
I already grabbed light green, so I'll just stick with that.
I will be salmon.
Salmon. Love it. Cody looks like he's grabbed orange. So there you go, Cody.
I will take blue.
Okay. Matt, what are you feeling?
Alrighty.
I got gray.
Okay.
I mean, look, everyone took all the fun colors, so
Okay.
just, you know.
I'm going to choose not to interpret too much about like your mental state and your enjoyment of this exercise. In
That's
your
fair.
color choice.
You should not do that because
Okay.
I'm very much looking forward to
Cool.
this. Mine's just going to be bigger than everybody else's.
All right.
Dang it, Cody.
And so I'll count down, and then I'm going to press start on my 5-minute timer and just throw out the stuff that you think went well. We're only doing what went well here, and doesn't matter too much if it's like similar to a note someone else already put down. You don't need to think about it too long. If it comes to mind, you could just write it down. Doesn't have to be high quality thought. So on that note, without further ado, I will start the timer in 3, 2, 1.
Just want to say the bigger words that you use, the more points you get. That's the mini game.
All right. Time is up.
All right.
No more sticky notes.
Music is ended.
Okay, so does anyone feel like they need extra time to put more notes down?
To be honest, I think we were all having a hard time finding 5 minutes worth of positive thoughts about the Temple of the Ocean King.
Fair. Yep. I don't need more time. Yeah, basically the way the rules of this usually go is the person running the meeting will ask that. And sometimes people do need more time. Like they couldn't get it all out. But we will not worry about that part. Wow. We got a lot of notes. I wonder if we can give me a count. No, I selected. Oh, I think there's 44 notes. That we got into the positive column. I'm definitely not going to have time to read them all for the listeners, but
I think
what we'll do.
So I was going to say, I think maybe what we should do is just go down the co-host list, and everybody can read off like maybe their top 3 observations or something.
Yeah, I think that's
well.
good.
The next step we're going to do is we're going to have a few minutes voting period. So what I'm going to do is basically start another timer, and I'm going to turn on voting mode in this app, and we're all going to vote on our favorites. I'm going to give everyone 5 votes. And just go ahead and read through all of them, and as best you can, and put down your votes, and then we will kind of read off like the top 5 or top 10, however much we feel like we have time for, that got votes.
Democracy!
Should we be voting for other people?
Yes, you can vote for any of them. And if it already has a vote, you can vote again, because that's how we'll be evaluating like the most popular notes. Okay, preparing results. So I realized as we were doing that I had made a tactical mistake, which was that I only gave us 5 votes when there were like 45 items to vote on. So yeah, we can just kind of chat through the top voted ones and then anything else that we think is worth calling out. So the number 1 voted thing, which got 4 votes, was DS map drawing mechanic paired well with plotting a route. So that goes right back to that very first goal, which is that recording information is useful, and they succeeded. They made it useful, and it sounds like we all voted yes on that.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few related ones that got votes as well, like recording information is useful and helps to streamline runs. Got 2 votes. Someone said it was fun to try to plot out plans on the map.
Yeah, another big one I'm seeing that I think we could put as like the number 2 successful was kind of a tie-in between Metroidvania sense of puzzles and the lower floors that are easier later in the game when you have a different item. And I think that pairs really well with this being an area outside of a dungeon where you can actually utilize dungeon items, which is missing in a lot of other Zelda games. Like, I think that idea was really cool and worked really well.
Yeah, there's a bunch of notes where people said like, oh, it's satisfying to return with better gear, or it was cool to like be able to pass through a floor faster because of a new item you got, which are getting at that same concept.
Mm-hmm. I would say my recommendation here would be, we've read off what got the most votes. I think we should give each person a chance to chime in with, to them, like, what is the big positive takeaway here?
Yeah.
And then from that, maybe let's distill that into a thesis statement of, we felt collectively Temple of the Ocean King did these 3 or 4 things well. So like, let's chat about it, then distill that into a thesis statement, and we can have that be the next section that goes live on the pod. Yeah.
Yep. That sounds good to me. Is that good with you, Max?
Yep, sounds great.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and pass it over to Cody first.
Sure. I mean, I guess I can talk about the ones that I did that got votes, maybe, or
yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. So I did the DS map drawing mechanic paired well with plotting a route one, which I think, was fairly unanimous there. I also said how to checkpoint. I think that got a vote, and that was one that I just thought was, potentially it could be used more, but it really was something that was a bit of a relief at that point. I think without it, it would have struggled a lot more in the later stages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Josh, what do you think were some of your top points?
Reading some of it again now is like a lot of it kind of ties together in this. Like, I do like how, because you have to go back, you can use your new items that outside of the dungeon you found them in to find an alternate route through each room. Which then pairs back to what Cody was talking about. Like, if you made notes on the map of a suspicious hole that you don't know what it's for or whatever, then you might try out something new later. But then also, just because you are checking out different parts of a room or going through it a different way, you'll solve extra puzzles, get more treasures. So just like that loop of, I mean, it is that Metroidvania loop of you're returning to an area with new stuff. It solves a problem that Zelda games often have, where your stuff kind of feels a little useless outside of the dungeon you got it in. In some games more than others, but this game definitely doesn't have that problem.
I'll jump in and go next. I think the 2 biggest points that I felt strongly about that did get some like interaction with votes were this one thing that we keep talking about, where one of the main creative goals was to increase tension as players go deeper into the temple, and I think that is something that definitely does happen, mainly via increased complexity of puzzles and the playable area as you go deeper into the temple, and that ties into what we were just saying with the traditional Metroidvania feels, where getting more things allows you more options to get a better time or whatever as you keep returning to the temple. So I think that's a successful, a successful execution on one of those main goals. And the second thing for me is we haven't really talked about aesthetic too much, but another one of our main creative pillars here was, feels like a new experience for a Zelda game. And I do think that is borne out just in the aesthetic of the Temple of the Ocean King. It does have kind of like a sinister, otherworldly feel to it. And it to me, it felt like it was a successful, it was successfully communicating like evil ocean stronghold, just via the colors and like I think the safety floors with their like moving color pattern. It feels like some kind of beautiful but terrifying like jellyfish or something. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Max, how about you?
Yeah, I think that basically two things stick out to me that I think are very successful to Temple of the Ocean King. The first one is that they did manage to create an experience that didn't feel anything like a normal dungeon, and it does hold together. You're feeling time pressure. You're not really learning new things through exploration. You get the whole map when you arrive on a floor, right? But it works as a different kind of experience than a dungeon. And the other one, of course, is that I think it is really satisfying to do floors way better and way faster because you have new items, but even more importantly, because you took good notes and you just know where to go because you took good notes. I found that very satisfying when it happened.
Yeah. So I think most of what I had was pretty similar. One of the unique ones was the Phantom Sword killing phantoms. It felt great, and while it was the very last time that we entered the Temple of the Ocean King, it made that item specifically feel powerful and important to this specific section, which I think is important for anything like the Master Sword to do something like that, where it gives you the ability to conquer a challenge that you had previously been able to conquer. So I think that was pretty successful. I don't hate stealth mechanics in games. I have problems with the Temple of the Ocean King in general, but stealth mechanic is not necessarily one of them. And it was definitely, whether you like stealth mechanics or not, this was definitely a successful use of stealth mechanics. So it definitely, it performed on that premise. So I'll give it those two just on top of the ones that we've already talked about. So I think the next thing, just to distill it down into an overarching statement of our thoughts, is Max, I'll let you correct me, but I'm going to give a stab at it, is we think the Temple of the Ocean King really performed well on its premise of utilizing note-taking and new items to progress more efficiently through the dungeon experience. While it felt like a unique dungeon experience within a Zelda game, unlike anything that it had before it, it ramps up tension and difficulty the further you get into it, which is true to what it was trying to accomplish. And I think those are kind of the main points that I had. Anything do you think I missed, Max?
No, I think that's a pretty good summary.
Cool. All right. So there you go. Temple of the Ocean King did those things well. Congratulations.
Yep.
Round of applause.
All right. So the next step is we're going to repeat that process, but in the not so well column. So I'm going to start a timer, and we are going to put a bunch of sticky notes about what didn't go well. Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. All right, time's up. Does anyone need more time?
Can I have the rest of the week?
No. All right, cool. The basic philosophy here is if it wasn't bad enough that you came up with it in the first 5 minutes, then it probably isn't going to be a top voted bad thing anyways. I'm seeing some very clear themes, which we'll go over momentarily, I guess. Okay, so we've got a bit more of a spread this time. There are several things that stand out as more votes than the rest, so we can actually kind of go through this in order of most votes to start. So number one, with 3 votes, well, there's like 4 things tied for number 1, actually. So the first one is no combat, mostly. Got 3 votes. The next is timer is so stressful that it's difficult to watch for new paths. Mm-hmm. Got 3 votes. No final floors for end game. Got 3 votes. No actual rewards for setting better times. Got 3 votes. And then there are a number that got tied for 2 votes. So let's see. Do we have any other themes we want to call out that maybe got split between multiple?
I think the slow moving, like whether you are moving slowly to avoid tripping the sound thing or moving slowly with an object, was definitely a big one that sucked, in combination with the timer and the stealth and the inability to do anything about phantoms. Like when you throw slow movement on top of those things, it's really not a good feeling. It doesn't incentivize exploration beyond the path to get to the end point. Like, I know that there are treasure maps and other things that you can find in this area, but when you have the timer and you have to do all that stealthily, it just doesn't, it's so superfluous that you don't really engage with it, in my opinion, or it's not rewarding enough to be engaged with. The sameness of the aesthetic all the way down through is definitely a blow.
Yeah, that wasn't one of the top voted ones, but there were a lot of different notes that kind of got at that idea, which is like the vibes were the same from beginning to end. The aesthetic was the same from beginning to end. Nobody explicitly called out music, but like the music is the same from beginning to end. So that all was a big theme here.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Do you want to do the same thing as last time? We just kind of each one talk about a couple, then we'll generate a thesis statement and go from there.
Yep, I think that sounds good. Max, let's start with you this time.
Okay, my big problem, it didn't feel like a Zelda experience to me. And this is kind of the result of all the other problems, but like there's no sense of exploration. I don't feel like I'm in a place that I want to know more about. It all feels very like gamey, like I'm playing an arcade game or something, right? Like a Pac-Man level that I'm running around in. And when I'm playing a Zelda game, I'm looking for like, I want to feel like I'm exploring a cave or a dungeon or a ruin, and I just don't get that feeling from this place at all. I have a lot of other problems, but let's go to the next person.
Josh, we'll bounce it to you.
Yeah, so I think I'll highlight that you're supposed to be drawing on the map to note interesting or things to come back for, but because of the timer and needing to watch out for phantoms and just all the things going on, it just becomes too much, and taking notes becomes annoying. Kind of going on with that same kind of idea is like that the puzzles later on get so complex. Like I had the room with the room, the like 3 floors with the little blocks you had to put the circle and the triangle and square. I had so many notes all over that to try and tell me which way to go. There was just not enough space. It was too complex for the note taking they wanted you to do. I had filled the whole screen with notes. And so it just doesn't work.
Yeah, somebody put down like they wish that there was a pin system because it would have made it easier.
Yeah.
Just getting at that same idea.
Yeah, that was mine. So I'll just take it from there. I think piggybacking off of Josh's no notes, I think a pin system would have made it better. Also, just like the lack of any available combat or other way to progress without just creeping around stealthily. Like, I think stealth should still have been the major component, whether you like it or not. That's obviously what they were going for. But not having any other way to progress through at a meaningful pace was not good. And when you combine that with a lot of these other things, the timer, the moving slowly with when you're carrying objects or when you're trying not to trip the floor sensors, like you start combining those things and you just end up with a really hard, punishing experience that if you mess up and then you have to restart all the way back at the beginning, like it's just not good. And I think it could definitely put folks off if they fail frequently, which luckily I didn't fail very frequently, but the few times I did, I was just like ready to rip my hair out and throw my DS across the room. So like that's definitely one of them. And then combining that with there are other things that you can get in Temple of the Ocean King, whether it's I think it's mostly treasure maps or ship parts, but like going out of your way to get those and decreasing your timer to do that was not something that I think anybody is really willing to do for the most part. Like it it's there, but why would you engage with that when you have such a punishing mechanic overall? So I think those are kind of my top detractors.
Yeah. I'll go next. I think for me, the feel of things is definitely, it's tough because one of our main goals was that you want there to be more tension as you go deeper into the temple. And I think one of the ways that you could do that most successfully is just visually and from an aesthetic standpoint. And the temple doesn't really feel much more evil or deeper the further that you go into it, which is definitely a problem. No combat was one that I think really holds this back for me, and that I was really resonating with that point. It's just, like if it was going to feel like a Zelda experience, even if you were going to have stealth and areas where you had to move slowly, you've got to sprinkle some combat in there. Otherwise, it was never really going to have a chance to pop off, and it didn't. And then the last thing for me was, let's see. Oh yeah, the low enemy variety, I guess, that just issues in general with the enemies that you come up against in the Temple of the Ocean King. They feel the same from floor to floor. You see new like tiers of phantoms, but they don't actually get harder. I think that's a big miss, especially for a series where it's kind of known for pitting you up against more difficult and scarier enemies the further that you get into the game. And I think that's just another thing that's serving to, keep the tension from building as much as I think they wanted it to once you get deeper and deeper into the temple. And I think that means Cody is the last one to go.
Yeah, so aside from the ones that have already been covered, one of mine was not enough changes to already done levels on an average run. And I was just thinking about, because there are plenty of video games in which you do sort of go through the same stretch of levels over and over for fun. That's an entire genre. But the problem there is that those are sort of roguelikes or that kind of thing, like where there is variation each time you do it. And so I was just thinking, but of course, a roguelike system would get rid of the recording information being useful and that sort of thing. But I still felt that if there was more to come back to on a repeat run, that would be something that would be beneficial, because it just feels like you're wasting time a lot of the time when you don't have a new shortcut to take or anything like that.
Yeah. Good notes, everyone. Matt, I kind of wrote down some of the themes I was hearing people talk about there, but if you want to try to restate everything like you did before.
Yeah, I think overall the main points just kind of boil down to the combination of stealth, no available combat to get yourself out of a sticky situation, no incentive for exploration, enemies who spot you and ruin your stealth run, and moving slowly. Like, you combine all of those things and it becomes a very punishing experience. And then you throw on top of that how repetitive it is, how it didn't differentiate itself in the end game, how the enemies were the same throughout, even when they just changed color, they were still more or less the same. I think all those things kind of jump to top of mind as like the main categories of what didn't work well overall. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you all. So that concludes the post-mortem of the Temple of the Ocean King. If this were a real game development environment, those lessons would be summarized by like a producer and written down somewhere, and like they would try it. Everyone who participated would hopefully, like, it would help clarify like lessons that were learned for them on their next project. That sort of thing would go on. And it would not be paired with a brainstorming like we're about to do. But because of how we're doing this for funsies, we're just going to go straight from postmortem to brainstorm. So at this point, we are shifting gears. We are no longer talking about Temple of the Ocean King as it was. We are instead going to start talking about Temple of the Ocean King as it could be in another universe or a sequel. For 3 of us in this room haven't really played through Spirit Tracks. Lyndon, Matt, and myself. So a fun element of all this is that the Zelda team actually did do a second iteration of the Temple of the Ocean King in another Zelda game, but 3 of us haven't played that, so we don't actually know what they came up with. They might have done a process just like this one. Probably different though. But yeah, so the way the brainstorm is going to work a little differently. I have put down 4 boxes, 5 boxes actually, but 4 main boxes on the whiteboard, and each one corresponds to one of the 4 creative goals that I listed off earlier, which I will repeat right now. So goal number 1, recording information is useful. Goal number 2, it is satisfying to attain mastery through repeat play. Goal number 3, tension increases as the player goes deeper. And then goal number 4, overall, it feels like a new experience for a Zelda game. So those are the 4 boxes. And the way we will do this is a more freeform thing. I'm not going to do the thing where I have 5 minutes of silent sticky note. I instead want us to just kind of one category at a time, kind of talk openly about like ideas we might have, like what might have made this particular goal be achieved more strongly. And we could riff off each other, write down ideas as we talk. I will put on an overall timer just to make sure we're like not doing a 4-hour episode. And then when we're done, we will vote for these as well. Alrighty. So our first goal is recording information is useful. So like in kind of a free-form way, we can just kind of throw out ideas. Like what do people think could be cool to make this into a thing that matters more for players in a Zelda experience?
So we kind of touched on it a bit ago, but I think that having icons you could use instead of always having to try and handwrite with the stylus, like the number of times that I erased what I wrote and then wrote the same thing again just because I didn't like the way it had ended up on the screen was a lot. So I think having a pen system like Breath of the Wild with different little icons that are useful, I think would be an improvement. I like the freeform writing, and I don't think that should go away. I just think that having some stickers you can put around would simplify.
Yeah, a supplement to the freeform and the pin system I think would be really great because I have bad handwriting. Like and what really put me off from utilizing this more was not only the time it took to write the notes freeform, but also like how do I want to indicate this thing that I want to think about later in a way that when I come back and play this a week from now, I remember what that is. And that was really hard for me to do without like writing it out all the time. Like, do I put a hole for this bomb chew thing? Or if I put a hole, could that also be a switch? Or like, I don't know. Like when I come back 2 weeks later, I don't know what this is anymore.
Notes like that.
I was like putting X's where switches were, and then like trying to like, well, I guess I'll make circles something else. And then there were circle squares and triangle shape icons. Like, oh, well, I'm already using these shapes to mean something else.
Yeah,
something that would have helped would have been just like more resolution on the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I had a finer tipped stylus and it actually let me draw thinner lines, like I could have done a better job.
Yeah, I think also the map is pretty bare bones. So like and I'm just doing this off of memory. So like I'm trying to remember where, if you're trying to do a bomb chew hole somewhere, you could be doing it in a thick layer of wall. And like, but where does that necessarily lead to? And I don't know, I think the map itself needed better resolution to make note taking more useful, in my opinion. Like I think one that did this really well, at least for path drawing, was the maze game. And like I used note drawing on the maze game more than I did in Temple of the Ocean King, where I was writing down or indicating where all the stones I was supposed to hit were. I was drawing the path. I was drawing like where a bridge was or a switch that would create a bridge that I needed. So being able to like link those two things together would be cool. Like what if I could mark a switch with a color, and then that color would be somewhere else on the map to say this switch affects this thing over there, because there's not really a way to do that right now that I can think of without drawing like arrows and long lines.
Man, just thinking about the pin system, just like, what if you actually had like a bomb chew pin and a grappling hook? Like you could have actual icons for what they were.
Now we're talking.
Something else that, you know, is kind of a maybe more hardware limitation, but it's just like having like a free space to actually write notes or put something without it having to be on top of the map would be helpful, so that you could actually give yourself some extra context, or not necessarily be like drawing over something important just to have a note, but instead you're like trying to write in the margins of the map. And you can't really do that.
Yeah, I think.
I mean,
oh, sorry, go Max.
Something as simple as letting you zoom in and then write would have given us like twice as much canvas to work with.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I like the idea of item stickers a lot, especially in a game like this where you don't have that many main items, right? I think there's like 7 or 8. And so, yeah, like the ability to have those as stickers and to place them on like, oh, there's like an arrow eye target over here or whatever, I think would be really nice. The other thing is that in order to incentivize detailed note taking, I think it would be much better if the timer stopped while you were in note-taking mode, and so it didn't like take away time from you while you were just
not.
I didn't think it did.
I only ever took notes in a safe zone because I didn't want to risk it. So
Maybe that's what I was doing then, because I never really thought about that. Maybe I was just always in a safe zone.
Yeah, so
what if the safe zones were invisible and you had to note them down on your map?
Oh, Max, that sounds horrible.
It sounds horrible, but something like that would help achieve this goal.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of like I was sort of thinking of it in terms of comparisons to other games. There's well, firstly, just in the DS generation. I don't know if anyone else has played Etrian Odyssey.
I know of it. I haven't played it, but I know where you're going with it.
Yeah, well, so that's a series originated on the DS. It's all about keeping track of your own maps and that kind of thing. I won't go too far into it, I guess, because it's nobody understands.
Well, the game is about like it's a dungeon crawling game where you have to like draw the map as you play.
Yeah. And that's sort of another approach, I guess, to doing that in the DS format.
Yeah, it's not super unlike the one like Whale Island where you didn't have a map and you had to like make notes of what was around. It's just turned into an entire game.
Yeah. The other thing, I'm just thinking of Breath of the Wild, for example, as an example of recording information doesn't mean that the content has to be reused. Like there can be templates of things. Like I'm thinking about marking shrines in Breath of the Wild or something like that, which is a similar idea of like, all right, well, we're navigating this map from the markings that we've put down on the map. But it's not that we have to repeat the same levels exactly to do it, but you're repeating the same processes, but not the same landscape. So that was just
throughout the rest of Phantom Hourglass, what they would do is they would tell you information that you're going to need in the future, and then you would write it down so that you had it when you got there. That was how most of PH worked. It was only Temple of the Ocean King that did the like repeat play.
Yeah.
Which did do this interesting thing where it was like kind of more organic about you could decide what information was useful to record.
Yeah.
Instead of just like writing down a password.
I think that another thing that might be nice is if recording information was more useful outside of just puzzle solving shortcut scenarios. Like this goes a little bit into just the general layout of the temple and the lack of combat as well. But I do think that if there were more situations where, like, say there's a floor that's more maze-like in its orientation, and there are certain areas where you can be ambushed by, waves of enemies or whatnot, or something like you don't see the enemies like prowling the corridor or whatnot. They kind of they can jump out a little bit. I think that if there were more encounters like that, then it would incentivize note taking for that reason as well, and it would just kind of add some variation to the reasons that you're taking notes.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about what if the notes weren't just for solving puzzles inside the temple, but were also used outside the temple to solve things in other islands or on other dungeons or something like that.
That would be interesting.
Instead of it only being like, you take this note and now you need it for the room you took it in, but instead it was more incentivized because notes from the temple or maybe notes from outside the temple were needed in the temple too. I mean, that you could do something like that.
I actually love that idea, and I think I want to expand on what I think you're saying. And so, like, what if floors of the Temple of the Ocean King had some base connection to other dungeons or overworld areas, and notes between Temple of the Ocean King and its adjacent overworld area could like interact or be important for their corresponding place, right? Is that kind of what you're saying, Josh?
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily saying just like for one corresponding place, or I mean, I guess there would be because that would be for a specific puzzle, but yeah, just
so Tears of the Kingdom did this in a couple ways, right? Where like the underworld and the overworld mirrored each other.
You're right.
Yeah,
and you could use information from one to figure stuff out on the other.
Yeah, and if the Temple of the Ocean King, the floors were somehow linked aesthetically or their overall like vibe was the first floor was the Isle of Embers or whatever, and then you have the ninth floor, which was like Anuki Island, and it was kind of icy, and you had similar puzzles between those two areas where, I remember I did this on Anuki Island, or if you're on Anuki Island and you did Temple of the Ocean King, you're like, I remember I did this in Temple of the Ocean King, this looks kind of similar, let me go look at my note from the temple, or let me go look at my note from the island and see how I solved that and see if they interplay at all. Like that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Are we
I think it could
depths is like the Temple of the Ocean King?
No. We're saying the Temple of the Ocean King should be more like the depths, and it is not currently.
I think it could be really fun if you were able to find detailed maps of later floors of the Temple of the Ocean King in earlier floors, and then you have to try and like transcribe details of that down into your notes. So especially this would kind of play a little bit into the temple feeling more dangerous the further that you go into it too. Like imagine if some of the lower floors have some element of sensory deprivation going on where it's like low light or something. But like in an upper floor, you find a chunk of map or whatever that lists the locations of like toggle torches or something in those floors.
Yeah. And that could also incentivize exploration of the temple itself. Instead of just getting a useless ship part, you would get a map that would help you later. That would make it more valuable to take time out of your run to go find those maps. Even if you fail that run, you now are better set to succeed later.
Yeah.
I like that. Big brain play, Lyndon.
Thank you.
What if there was some system where the stuff you write on the map actually affected or appeared in the world? Like maybe before you go through a maze, you're given an opportunity to view the map and you can draw a path. And then you can't see the map anymore, but you can see a path on the ground.
Like Okami?
Is the thing that comes to mind. Is that, man?
That is what I also thought of immediately. gosh.
I do love that game. I haven't played it in 18 years.
Yeah, so in Okami, you can just like, there'll be like a broken area or you need like a bridge and you'll just like have to paint a big floppy rectangle on the screen and then it'll actually happen.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was I put it down as a note of drawing affects the world itself. Just the idea of the reason you have a bridge there is because you've got the bridge drawn on your map. And maybe you have to erase the bridge or something for some little bonus thing where, a treasure chest is under there or something. Like you can play around with information doubling as a gameplay thing.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes. We can circle back around to these kind of topics, but for now, I think we should move to the next box, unless someone has like a last thing they want to throw out there for this section.
I think that's a pretty good lineup of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's do a quick vote then, just for posterity, which is I'll just give us 1 minute because we only have a few notes here, and 3 votes each. And I'll just read off our results real quick. Somehow the pin system got 5 votes, even though there are 5 votes.
The phantom voter. That's what we should call this
Someone
episode.
voted for it
Ding.
multiple times. Just put all their 5 votes into it.
Next highest voted was what if information written in the temple is used outside the temple. Third is drawing affects the world itself. And then the fourth was some floors could have sensory deprivation, like low light, with maps findable earlier in the temple. Okay, so cool. Those are our highlights from this section. Let's move on to goal number 2. It is satisfying to attain mastery through repeat play.
So
like what?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to kind of start here because I found this to be the least, like I cared about this the least out of any of the rest of them because there was no intrinsic reward. There was no extrinsic reward for attaining mastery. Like you didn't get a piece of heart. You didn't get an item or a map or like it literally was just like number go up. And like, that's not a satisfying game loop for me. Is just like, how do you make it be better? So I think this really needed, in my opinion, some kind of reward for getting a certain time. So like if you beat this time on this floor, you'll get 100 rupees. Like it could have been as easy as that, or as impactful as a piece of heart or a wisdom gem or something like that. Like I think it needed something to incentivize you to want to do better outside of just better time.
So I've put down Temple of the Ocean King internal currency. And basically my idea here is I was thinking about, because in terms of being satisfying to attain mastery through repeat play, I was thinking about games like Hades, for example, which I think Max is a big fan of.
Yeah.
And that's a game where you're sort of doing the same sets of levels over and over. It is... it is a roguelike, so the levels are different, but what you gain out of it, even if you do a failed run, is that you've gained sort of currency towards things that will help you, like another health bar or a second dash or whatever is something that you can pay for with sort of currency that you get by failing, I guess, or by succeeding, or even if you fail, you're working towards something. And that's why I came up with that was my vague idea of internal currency.
Yeah. You're kind of getting at something that I was planning to throw out there for this, which is like, what if the Temple of the Ocean King was a roguelike dungeon? Now, that is in direct conflict with the recording information goal, but that's a separate problem. If for the purposes of attaining mastery, a roguelike is great because it kind of, you have to go through that loop of building yourself up and like trying not to lose health too much earlier on, or trying to gain currency earlier on that helps you get further in the roguelike run. Like all that stuff kind of gives lots of layers of expressing your mastery to get deeper. And then it can very well be something like you get deeper into deeper floors if you're better at it. It's very much about mastery.
Yeah, I think that all sounds good. One thing I was kind of thinking is this sort of plays into one of our main complaints as well, which is the lack of combat, right? What if there was a mechanic? So I guess what if the timer was timing you based on like by the floor instead of as a whole experience? You could have a system where the more time that you spend on a floor, the more enemies that populate into the space. And so if it takes you too long to get through, then you're getting kind of overrun and mobbed by dudes. That could incentivize you to really optimize your route to the end of the floor, just by virtue of the fact that like the faster that you get through, the less trouble that you're having with enemies.
Yeah, no,
and players that are really confident could decide to try to stick around as long as they could and get more rupees by killing more enemies or whatever.
So what that reminds me of is Pikmin. There's a water level enemy that's like the water wraith or something that like after 5 minutes in certain sort of dungeons in Pikmin just starts showing up and it's just like an invincible enemy that's very dangerous that will just like steamroll you. And that adds to the tension, but it's not, I think that's a way of potentially using an invincible enemy in a way that's sort of like, it's because you were too slow and you wanted to get all the little treasures and stuff on the floor as opposed to just always being around.
Yeah. I see, Max, I think you put a note up with that says secret ending real big. And I'm not sure exactly what you meant by that, but what I thought of as soon as I saw that was, what if there was some sort of situation where, if you make it all the way through the temple of so you're just trying to get to the end of the temple of all the whatever floors are currently available, get a new C map or whatever. And all you need to do to progress the game is just to clear it. It doesn't necessarily matter how long it takes as long as you're still within the time limit. But what if it's stated to the player that's like there's a magical force or a benevolent entity or something, or like the Temple of the Ocean King is like briefly liberated if you make it through these floors super quick or whatever, something like that. But anyway, getting through like setting a record time getting through these floors or getting through all of them within a certain amount of time. What if it gives you access to like a special vendor at the end of the run, right? Where you can buy powerful potions, or like you have access to heart pieces or something like, there's like some economy motivation for you to invest that extra time. Especially like as it contributes to like you want to collect these number of things, and some of them are only collectible by accessing this vendor that you can only get to if you clear the Temple of the Ocean King floors in a certain amount of time.
Yeah. So the very first note I put down was variable outcomes depending on how well you do. There's this whole idea where like we need to make people care about doing well if we want them to try to do well, right? Like whether that's better rewards for going faster or access to more stuff. And that was a very generic note on my part. But like, yeah, a lot of the ideas you put forward are a type of variable outcomes depending on how well you do, which makes mastery more appealing to more different player types.
What if you got good at the game and then the ending was actually good?
Maybe nobody's been good enough to discover the true ending. because you needed to be just that fast in the Temple of the Ocean King to unlock it.
Okay, crazy idea I put down. Every time you complete a floor, you get to change one thing permanently about the floor. And then I didn't think about it any further than that. So I don't know what those things would be. But like, what if you got to like change a block or have a different type of enemy spawn? And then like over time, if you played it a lot, you could gradually like craft the floor into being optimized for you.
I like that idea a lot, actually.
Cool
I
idea.
think it'd be really fun if I could like permanently remove one of those pesky firewalls or the spike traps or something like that. Like, yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this kind of goes back to the currency discussion we were just having too. Like, what if at the end of every floor, you gain a certain amount of like it totals your points, right? Maybe it doesn't look as mathematical as that, but it's just like, you get to the end of a floor and you see that you earned 27 golden essence in that run or something. And then the game has some way of telling you like, hey, if you clear a floor and you get 30 golden essence in that floor, then you have dispelled the evil from the floor and enemies will not spawn there anytime you visit it again in the future. Or something like that. I think that's like a little bit less out of the box than what you're saying, Max, but I think they're variations of the same thought.
Yeah, there's this feeling of like, after beating it enough times, you have conquered a floor. And now it's not a problem anymore is kind of an interesting thing to throw in there.
And I had a note, checkpoints every floor, brackets for speed running. I wanted because speed running is, I guess we haven't actually mentioned it, but that's sort of what they're going for in terms of attaining mastery through repeat plays. The timer is a big part of it. So what if, for example, you could have a checkpoint on every floor of like, that's your run. And if you want to, you can just move on. But the time is much stricter. So it's like, those 7 seconds or whatever that you saved on that first floor by redoing it 3 times really has an impact on how you're doing on the 15th floor. So you might want to go back and be like, all right, I can do some of these early floors easier now, but you're able to tackle them as individual floor challenges with their own timer.
It would be nice if that was tied into some kind of, some very explicit reward system. Like I'm imagining, what if your items were upgradable in this game the way that they are in A Link Between Worlds, right? But the way that you do that is by getting better times in the Temple of the Ocean King. And also if the floors are themed a little bit more explicitly towards one item, like, if you've got 5 floors, one floor might be it might have like a lot of boomerang puzzles, right? And then as you get further into the game, you get more floors that open up that are related to the items that you've been getting in the dungeons, right? So it's like your second to last one is the grapple hook floor or whatever. And if you clear those floors in a certain amount of time, then that's how you unlock an upgrade to your item. Like I think that's the kind of thing that players really enjoy. Like that's a tangible goal, and especially if you know it's like, oh hey, I can get like fire power added to my boomerang or whatever. Then that's a pretty good incentive to go in and try to get a better time on the boomerang floor.
Yeah, I think on that topic, I think some sort of official speed ranking, as in,
like a leaderboard,
like a social aspect to the game.
No, I mean that might be good too, but that could be the daily challenge or something. But like just in terms of like you rank est that level, so you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Got it.
Like the game has built-in brackets of telling you how good you were.
Yeah, you got the platinum medal on floor 3.
Yep.
But you only have the bronze medal on floor 4.
And that's what would tie into the rewards is like all right, well, you've completed it at the B rank, but now that you've got the grappling hook, you might be able to get there all the way to A rank, which is a bit more currency or a bit more of an upgrade on a relevant thing or that kind of thing. Because currently it's all very vague of just like, I feel like I've got a good time. It's enough of a good speed for me to finish, but like there's not a real like, I just platinum to that stage.
I mean, it's a good idea, and like if you look at like games like Mario Kart, people don't even need a reward to care about getting the best grade, like beating the hardest difficulty of every track or whatever. Like a lot of people just care about that intrinsically as soon as you start ranking them like that.
Yeah, the Mario Kart also has. I will put in time trials. Ghost ? Because this is what Mario Kart does that I have always enjoyed in the time trials is the ghost of the person who's racing better than you, and which is usually yourself. Like it's the ghost of yourself that you're racing against, but you can sort of keep track step by step. That might be fun for a time trial style thing.
Yeah, if every time I replayed a floor in Temple of the Ocean King, even if everything else was identical, if I just saw my ghost of my best time, that would totally change the experience, I feel like.
I don't think I have anything else necessarily.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I've not been feeling particularly inspired on specific ideas, but it seems like the big thing is like there is no reward for doing this right now, and there needs to be some sort of organized reward system.
A reward in the sense of how well you're actually doing.
Okay, and the results are in. Number one thing was time spent in a floor could cause an increase in enemy density. Quicker runs means you don't get mobbed. Everyone liked that. Almost everyone. We didn't actually talk about that one too much, so I'm surprised to see that one at the top of the list. And then we've got one that had 4 votes. With 3 votes was time trials, which was Cody's idea, and then ghost in parentheses. And then we have a few that are tied with a bunch of them that have 2 votes. So that includes roguelike mode. You get to change one thing about each floor every time you play. Extrinsic rewards based on completion, and official speed ranking like rank S, rank A, rank B, etc. Upgrade items based on fast times, and Temple of the Ocean King internal currency. So those last like 6 were all tied with 2 votes. Bunch of awesome ideas in there, which brings us to our third goal. Tension increases as the player goes deeper. By the way, if any of the previous ideas also apply to this, feel free to copy paste them over if you so desire.
Okay, cool. Definitely going to have one for that. I think that this is one. This category and the next one are really big. About like the topic of conversation here is feel in a lot of ways, right? I know tension can come from a lot of different sources. It can come from mechanical complexity, combat intensity, aesthetic look and feel. I'm going to focus on that last one right now and just say that I think what would really need to happen is that the temple should feel more evil and more sinister the further that you go into it. Because it really does all feel very samey. Like the first floor feels pretty much the same as the last floor. But I think that there needs to be some sort of some sort of setting, some trappings that indicate that, yes, you are getting closer and closer to this imprisoned evil spirit that's like the big bad of the entire game. And that can come from a lot of places. I think that the actual design of the space is one of them. It needs to be darker. The music needs to change to be more sinister. But also, I think that, Matt says music with like 10 exclamation points. That would be my Post-it note for like Phantom Hourglass as a whole, by the way. just by the way,
Just music.
yeah, exactly. So then combat intensity as well. I really do think that the enemies just need to be more threatening the further that you get into this thing.
Like Death Mountain in Zelda 1 is really tense. And it's 100% because it's just hard as hell and you're lost all the time. If you're like me, at least.
No, yeah, I feel that for sure. I'm hijacking other people's points right now, and I'm sorry about that. But Cody, you've got one posted here that says increasing dialogue with Bellum as you go deeper, and that is a great idea, and it also solves one of the main issues with the game as a whole, which is Bellum having no presence and no personality. Like if you're feeling the presence of Bellum and are interacting with it as you go further and further into the temple, I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah,
Bellum has no presence whatsoever.
And Josh has an addendum attached to my note that says "Make Bellum not suck."
Well, it's like, so you get to the end, and it's like you kind of assume it's the end, right? But it's like there's nothing there that's telling you like, oh yeah, this is Bellum. Like you've never seen Bellum, you don't know what Bellum is. And so it's just like, is this Bellum? Is this just Argus in a Nintendo DS form? Like, what is this? So,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to finish your thought, Josh.
That's all. It's just like nothing about the game ever really explains what Bellum is. And you just get to the end and, there's a monster.
There he is.
Oh, I guess that's Bellum.
Yeah. I think one thing that could permanently increase tension in the Temple of the Ocean King is just make it on the ghost ship. The ghost ship was like the coolest set piece in the game. It drew our attention more than any other part of this game from the get-go. The fact that all of this, like leading up to Bellum's lair, didn't happen inside the ghost ship just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I think transpose Temple of the Ocean King into the ghost ship and you have a more tension-filled, better area aesthetically and as a vibe overall.
I somewhat disagree with what you're saying, but I can also see there being some kind of fictional rationale for if you get deeper within the ghost ship, there would be reasons for why it would be creepier the further that you go down, right? Like if you're starting on the top deck, you know, and then next you're like down in the crew quarters, and then below that's the brig, and then the floor below that is like the bilge, right?
Yeah, I mean, and then you get like real hardcore the further you go down. It starts getting into like a Dark Souls-esque vibe where it's like everything is really jacked up, and you're like, okay, this is actually scary. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm down for that.
So when I think of games that have really tense moments for me, I think of Metroid Fusion and Metroid Dread.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part of what, like, those games have these scary, invincible enemies that you need to hide from and run from, right? And part of what makes them scarier is that they aren't there all the time. Like, normally you're like feeling powerful, you're running around, you're blasting stuff, and then like, oh crap, the scary monster is here. Now I need to hide. And it has that ebb and flow. And Temple of the Ocean King is all that. Like, it's 100% of the time it's just scary monster, and it kind of stops being scary, right? What if there was like a actually scary version of a phantom and it hunted you down and you had to like take action to hide and keep moving, otherwise it'll find you, and like it gets dark when it's chasing you. Like, that sort of thing would actually feel very tense.
Yeah, and that is I don't know if it was Max that wrote what on my on the image that I pasted in there, but that is the water wraith from Pikmin that I was talking about earlier. This is the being chased, and I've attached chased by Shadow Link because this is a classic Zelda move and a classic Metroid move. Classic Nintendo move really is, what if there was a scary shadow version of you that chases you around? It's one of their classic maneuvers. It doesn't have to be Shadow Link, but that's always a fun time.
Well, it's like Battle Line from Celeste, you know.
Yeah. Look, there's always there's Shadow Mario. There's always Nintendo loves it, and yeah. So
SAX.
and I'll just we touched on it before, but increasing dialogue with Bellum as you go deeper. This is one that I thought like it increases the tension, and it also just increases the level of characterization. While you're in there, just dealing with a few of the other issues that aren't really they're not really in one of these categories, but it's just like it's sort of, as we were saying in the issues with it, it's just sort of a boring, monotone, same experience the whole way through.
Yeah.
And if you had that, dialogue with Bellum is one example, but just that general problem, a way to deal with that could be through having just more interaction. But I think interaction with the villain would hit 4 birds or so with one stone.
Yeah. So I just dropped in a note that I feel like I really need to give some more context to. So my note says throw in a few long staircases, and let me explain. I think
I know what you're thinking.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that is causing this temple to not, like, you never really feel like you're going deeper into the ground, right? Is that you go through a door and then you pop out in another floor, right? I think one of the things that this temple really needs to have is, like, in Ganon's Tower in Ocarina of Time, you've got like big long stretches of spiral staircase between main rooms of it as you kind of ascend the tower towards Ganondorf playing the organ or whatever. And like you have tension building things happening while that's going on. Like the lighting is changing, the music is getting louder. Like it's giving you space to like traverse this long staircase, and like that you're moving towards something more dangerous. Like from a visual and audio standpoint, even though it's not necessarily what you would consider a gameplay space, like there's no enemies, there's no puzzles, it's like there's no friction against you traversing this space. You're able to use that time to create setting.
It's the breath before the plunge.
Yes.
So that you have time to be afraid of it.
Cody says Bellum playing the organ, and I think that might be the best idea Cody's ever had.
Yeah, I went hunting for a screenshot from Ganon's Tower because I knew exactly what you were going for, and Cody stole my thunder there with the organ.
Okay, so totally different thing, but what the strategy that Phantom Hourglass does use is they give you something to lose, which is time, right? If you get increasing tension as you go deeper, and 100% of it comes from the fact that if you die and take too long, then you have to start over, and that sucks, and you don't want that to happen, so it feels tense. But a slightly more nuanced version of that is the risk reward play. If we do stuff like, maybe there is a time limit and it's not that bad, but here's a side floor over here. It's a whole floor with a big reward at the end. You can choose to go after it or not if you're willing to risk the time. But if you die, you lose all the rewards you've gotten. Like something like that would help a lot with tension in a way that is a little bit more elegant than making you redo everything.
Yeah, so for me, I think the thing that would make the most difference in tension is just that basic point of needing more enemies, more types of enemies. There just needs to be more. The dungeon is too much just standing around waiting for the phantoms to walk around, and I think it would be better if it was just more active combat and increasingly difficult enemies, more of them as you got further in it.
Yeah, I honestly think Temple of the Ocean King, even if it was almost exactly as it is now, but it had combat instead of stealth, would just immediately be a better experience.
I agree.
Because they're trying to achieve things with a time limit, but they don't really succeed, so it kind of doesn't lose anything.
I feel like the time limit is like, it's more just scary in your head and doesn't actually make that big a difference to anything. like I don't know if I've ever actually run out of time, especially not on my repeat playthroughs. Maybe I did when I first played it, but running out of time seems more just like a threat than anything actually real.
And when you do run out of time, it's mostly just a nuisance.
Yeah, you just start losing health, and
Right.
you can just get pots to get more, or drink potions. So it's just like you almost have to like try to actually completely lose in the temple. So it's just there to be an additional stressor on top of all the other stressors, even if it isn't really meaningful. It's just that you have a timer kind of Majora's Mask feeling that makes it all feel more stressful than it actually is.
You can spend heart containers on a run to get shortcuts or other benefits.
I would never actually use that feature. I think a lot of
It
people
would be like
it's just that kind of kiss curse mechanic is just like is really appealing to some gamers, so it's cool, but like for me I'm just like, no, I just won't. I'll just ignore that.
it works better in kind of roguelike kind of games.
Yeah. So are you thinking of like Hades kind of thing where you can add more challenges and you get more rewards?
I was thinking like, here's a stronger sword, but you have to give up half your health for it. Was what I was thinking. But also the Hades style, like opt into a harder mode in order to get higher rewards also would work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that could be kind of cool. Like a situation where you, like between floors, you meet up with an NPC who's like, what's that crazy bat demon creature from Link's Awakening, right? Like you light the torches and it shows up. Yeah, the Mad Batter. Mad Batter shows up and is like, I'm going to curse you, except this one actually means it. And you've got to choose between like, you know, lose one heart and this thing happens, or you know, permanently lose 3 hearts in this floor, but you gain an advantage or something.
I would approve of this feature just because Mad Batter's one of my favorite Zelda characters. I wish he would come back.
Put Mad Batter in Smash Brothers.
Yeah, I think honestly, like we're coming up with a lot of gameplay systems ideas for ways to increase tension, but I really think that the biggest thing that would help the most is if this whole area just got a better sense of place. Because on paper, when you say this is it's an oceanic temple that descends deep into the earth, and at the very bottom of it, an eternal, malevolent, evil force is sealed, right? Like in my mind, I'm thinking of almost like an inverted Tower of the Gods from Wind Waker, right? Like I'm thinking of this like monolithic structure with this ultra specific, like ultra distinctive aesthetic feel to it. And like the deeper into it that you go, it just feels like you're descending into a pit. And at the very bottom of this pit is like, you know, it's like if you, like a lot of Zelda boss chambers do this, where like you drop through a hole and then you fall a really long way, and then you're in a dark room with like a crazy demon fish or something. And in my mind, that's what I'm thinking, you know?
Yeah, if it was like the first few floors, it's like, this is an ocean cave, there's some water, there's some sand, and it's like, oh, we're getting into like weird Cyclopean ruins, and there's like, you know, creepy statues. And then you go a little bit deeper and it's like, oh, this is like the heart of darkness, and there's like vast empty abysses, and like, yeah, they could definitely have leaned much harder into that kind of stuff.
This is sounding a lot like a Hyperlight Drifter sort of space right now, but I do think that sort of thing could work really well. And honestly, it would really help to prop up the ocean feel of everything. And it's one of those things where it's like, in this area specifically, but in all other areas of the game too. I just think that the setting and aesthetic could have been leveraged in much more impactful ways. But I think Temple of the Ocean King is where that would be the most important. And I think that what it actually is just a very video gamey feeling place. And I think that you get more tension the more that you depart from that.
Okay, so I'm going to start voting for this section now. And the results are, with 4 votes, number 1 is increasing dialogue with Bellum as you go deeper. Man, that would have solved so many problems at once. And then we've got 4 things that are tied for second place with 2 votes each. So first one of those is more enemies. Second one is throw in a few long staircases, which is the real point there was
Bellum playing the organ.
Some breathing room. Get some breathing room for like terror to mount here and there.
Yep.
And then the next one is make the vibes better. There's also a vote in there for creepier as you go deeper, which is kind of the same thing. That's the aesthetic stuff we were talking about a few minutes ago. And then the last one with 2 votes was invincible hunter enemy occasionally appears. That's the Metroid Fusion thing. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Time for the 4th and final goal. Hopefully you all still have lots of energy.
I'm good to go. I'm here for it.
So the last one is the least specific, the most open-ended, and this one feels like a new experience for a Zelda game. What could they have done more or differently? What crazy ideas can you throw out there that would hit this point?
But it also has to feel like a good new Zelda experience, because this does feel like a new Zelda experience, right? Like there's nothing that Zelda has ever done like this before, except it's not good. So how do we make it a good new Zelda experience? Yeah.
Now, we can all interpret this how we want. To me, part of what this implies is that it is still a Zelda experience. So it's still hitting the notes that I would care about for a Zelda game, even if it's hitting them differently than any other Zelda game has done before. But approach it how you wish.
I think, look, me and Josh are making a bunch of Spirit Track jokes right now.
This is tough. Honestly, This is a tough one.
Yeah, this one is I maybe should have narrowed this a little more. But I just put down roguelike. Make it a roguelike. I wish this had been a roguelike. I think they could have hit a lot of the goals here. And been better experience if it was something more along the lines of a experience that you play and repeat, and every time you replay it, it starts you off at a blank slate and builds you up, and you can build up in different ways each time. Kind of like what's it called? The island in Breath of the Wild.
Eventide. Like what if this was Eventide, which is basically a roguelike, by the way, except you just do it once.
I think that could have been a fun direction for a space that you go back to over and over again like this.
Yeah.
I like that, actually. And Eventide Island and also the Tears of the Kingdom versions, which are the shrines, the challenge shrines. What are they called? It's the same concept, but I have always really liked that concept and think that it works well at least in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It worked really well. And I think it would be interesting as a concept here. I think a lot of the things we've talked about how to make it more roguelike would have just made it a better experience in general. So I think as like a general blanket statement of like how to do this differently, roguelike is definitely probably the top of my list as well.
Yeah.
I agree. They're called Proving Grounds, by the way. It took me a minute to remember.
Yeah, I couldn't remember either. Thank you.
I'm wondering, so a big departure that this could have had for the Zelda series is if you are basically checking in with the final boss of the game every time that you come into the space, right? Like if you're having some kind of combat encounter with Bellum every time you meaningfully enter here, I think that could be a lot of fun. And again, that just kind of goes back towards increasing tension around Bellum as a character. But typically Zelda games, you might check in with the big bad once or twice throughout the game, but for the most part, you're not actually like bumping up against them too often. But if Bellum is like an ever-present threat, then I think that could be pretty effective.
So you're arguing for an imprisoned fight every time we enter the Temple of the Ocean.
That
Damn
is
it!
a little note that I've added to it.
Man, I take it back.
Bellum has toes. They're just a bunch of little eyeballs that fly around.
Oh, now I'm thinking about eyeball toes. It's like nightmare fuel.
Sounds like a Zelda boss.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Eyeball toes.
How did they make the imprisoned
Yeah.
and not put eyes on all the toes so you knew what to hit? Missed opportunity.
I put down a genre thing as well next to roguelike. I put down horror game vibes, and I put BioShock there, which is not a horror game per se, but it is a horror adjacent game of like you're wandering, under the sea. There's creepy things happening. There's a lost civilization. There's it's like a post-apocalypse kind of thing,
There's a lot of horror available in ocean settings, right?
Yeah.
Like Jaws or claustrophobia or
Fear of drowning.
ghost ships.
Right? Like
So we get a bunch of jump scares.
The ocean is inherently terrifying, but you don't really get aside from sharks and stuff. There's not really that much of the horror of the ocean in the Zelda series.
Well, yeah, I think aquaphobia as a thing that they're trying to harness here could have been really effective. That's probably goes into tension building as well. But I do think that it's like we've had water temples in the Zelda series before. But I do think that this is a whole other sort of thing that we're talking about right now. And I do think that could have, even if it was just aesthetic, right? Even if there were no mechanics tied into it, that could have made the Temple of the Ocean King feel more unique as a space.
What if it was literally like you are swimming? Like most of the time you can't swim, and then you go to this like central location, and instead of a temple, maybe it's a sinkhole or something, right? And you swim down, and it's swimming mode. You're playing like Subnautica or something.
Yeah.
That would be a very, very different direction. But
That sounds intriguing. It would live and die based on the actual like fun to play element of the mechanic.
yeah.
That is a good idea, but you've stolen my color.
Oh, did Whoops! I'm supposed to be salmon, not orange.
So tying back to like the idea of like needing to take notes in one dungeon or another island for the others, what if we talk about like puzzle box dungeons? What if all of the dungeons in the game were almost like a puzzle box that revolved around the temple, or vice versa? That where like in the water temple, you raise and lower the water levels. What if flipping some switch, changing the water level, whatever, in the Temple of Muto actually changed some part of the Temple of the Ocean King also? Maybe opening up shortcuts, or opening up a different part of one of the floors for the next floor. Just where it's all interconnected in a more intricate way, where your actions outside of the temple affected what you would see when you went into the temple.
This is good stuff. Predictably, I would say that. But riffing off of that, it makes me think about like one of the big problems I had with the game overall, and especially the Temple of the Ocean King, was a lack of feeling like I was exploring. And so like there's this cool idea there where like if you learn the rules of the temple and you learn that like, oh, when you like you can affect the temple in certain ways, you could create situations where you find a impasse in the temple and you realize, oh, there must be an island out in that direction that I haven't discovered yet that would allow me to change this. And then you can get more of a, like, you're exploring outwards from a central island in order to find the cogs you can turn that affect the temple back home.
No, I love that idea. I think it's a missed opportunity to have, because a lot of this felt like they were trying to make the world feel super connected to the Ocean King as an entity, and that, I think it mostly goes to everything that happened in the Cobble Kingdom. But outside of the Temple of the Ocean King, it never really felt like the Ocean King had a presence at all. So I think it would have been really cool to have all of that connected to itself, to each other, to really make it feel like a unified, unique experience.
One thing I wrote down a few minutes ago was, what if instead of floors that are passing through, each floor is an island, and there was a gameplay around navigating to the next island between each floor. I don't think it's a slam dunk, but there's something that appeals to me there.
Wait, can you describe that a little bit more? Because I'm not sure. Because that feels like just moving from one overworld island to another overworld island.
Yeah, so it would a lot of it would hinge on, like, what is this gameplay like between them? And to me, it's like, the thing I wish I was doing was more plotting my ship through the unknown. You remember the section when you're chasing the ghost ship around all those, like, misty islands you have to go through in a particular way?
Yeah.
That was like the closest the game ever got to that feeling for me, of exploring the unknown with the ship. So maybe there's some, like, there's fog on the map and you have to make a choice between left or right based on some obscure hints that you're getting.
Yeah, I think
coming together, though.
So based on that, I sort of put down Ocean Dark World ? I realize this, a Dark World is not a new experience for a Zelda game, but an ocean, as in what you're talking about, where it's like you're plodding through the fog or something in a different dimension or that kind of thing, and that's the Tears of the Temple of the Ocean. Sorry, I almost merged it with Tears of the Kingdom. Temple of the Ocean King experience still has that navigation and stuff. I have another couple that I put in there. Ignore the one about what if you're a wolf with a magic paintbrush. But I had loot and subquests. And these what I was thinking of is actually the Persona series, which has a similar template where between dungeons and stuff, they give you a sort of place with just like 100 levels that you make your way through and you're coming back to it.
Uh-huh.
And how they make that interesting is with, you go in there and it's like, oh, by the way, can you collect 3 of these parts from this particular enemy that's only available in this area? Or can you in Persona 5, there's a system where it's like there's people trapped down there, and if you sort of get the subquest, it gives you a reason to, while you're in this alternate zone, be like, oh, I'll check off this subquest that I activated from the main world. But someone's gotten stuck down here in the Temple of the Ocean King, and I can deal with that while I'm going through.
Oh, and the person is a blacksmith, and I rescued them, and now they settled in the town, and now I can upgrade my sword. Yeah, I think there's some fun ideas in there.
Yeah, except Nintendo would have made that like Zhao's, and it would have been required to forge the Phantom Sword.
Right. To a certain extent, we're not really describing normal Zelda games at this point, but that is the goal.
That is what this category is.
Yeah, I keep coming back in my mind to thinking about like, what if while you were in the Temple of the Ocean King, you felt like what you were doing in there was paving your way forward to the other areas of the game? Like, I know right now the goal is always to get to the end and you get a new piece of the ocean map and then you can go to a new place of the map. But what if it was like, what if the overworld was covered in like fog, like you were saying, Max? But in the Temple of the Ocean King, basically what you're doing is like you're having to alter elements within it to, I don't know, like light the mystical lighthouse of the Ocean King or something, right? And when all the pieces fall into place, the lighthouse activates and you dispel the fog over a new area of the map. And like that's the way that you get to new areas of the game. Like that's a hyper specific example, but I'm just thinking, I'm trying to think of ways that the temple itself could feel like a mechanical integrated part of this, like a linchpin of this entire world.
Yeah.
Especially like in hindsight now, knowing that this was a pocket universe, and like it was all the Ocean King's realm, you know? I think that it could have been very thematically interesting for the Temple of the Ocean King to have been at the center of everything. And like you have to go there in order to cleanse parts of the world so that you can explore more of the map. That sounds fun to me.
Yeah. If the world is the Ocean King's dream, we have to inception the Ocean King to cause more parts of the world to appear.
And then you have to set him up for a drop so that he doesn't stay asleep too long. And then you're timed from the point that you exit to completing the next section.
Yeah, but at the end of the game, was the Ocean King actually awake? Or
you have to spin a top and
you
spin a top and see what happens. Does it just stay spinning forever, or does it fall over?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got about a minute left in this section. I think we got a lot of good stuff here. But if anyone wants to put last notes out, now's the time.
Yeah, I mean, I added in my series of question mark ones with loot and subquests, I put full party. And this is just the idea of making it like you literally, when you go into this dungeon, it's like, I don't know, the different characters have a role. Like you've got Lionbeck and you've got Leaf and all of those, and they all have a thing that they can do or that kind of thing. And so it's more of a...
Oh, this is a floor where I need to bring out Gongaron.
Right, like, I guess making it feel like more of a heist, I guess. Like this is the heist section, which I know I've been talking about Persona the whole time, and that is also the premise of Persona 5. But just in terms of like, all right, here's the tools we need to get through this central hub, and each time we come back, we've got a little bit more to be able to pull this off. With and adding in the characterization, because I think that's just part of what's potentially missing in Phantom Hourglass a lot of the time.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Okay, so on that excellent final note, I'm going to start the voting for this section. All right. I was the one who held us up there because I couldn't decide on my last vote.
Hell yeah, roguelike wins.
Our top voted ideas, number one with 5 votes was roguelike, which is, not very specific, but we talked about it a lot over the course of this whole session. Number 2 with 4 votes was completing other dungeons changes the temple. All the dungeons are more connected to each other, like a giant global puzzle box. That's my favorite idea.
Oh, yeah, well, we know you love puzzle boxes.
That's for sure.
Number 3 with 3 votes is horror game vibes. We can all get behind that. I'm not sure if Nintendo would have loved it for their Phantom Hourglass audience, but we like it in this room. And then we've got 3 of them tied for 4th. One was explore outwards from central Temple of the Ocean King Island to affect the Temple of the Ocean King. That's kind of like the global puzzle box idea. The next one was Ocean Dark World. And then the one after that was full party heist.
I like heists.
So yeah. I mean, yeah, we were also just talking about Inception. That's totally a heist movie. Okay. So at this point, we've gotten through everything I had planned. My outline said that at this point, I was going to recap the results. But that's kind of a lot. And we kind of don't really have a specific like
vision,
top bullet points or whatever. There aren't like 5 bullet points to pull out of all this. We kind of came up with a bunch of cool individual ideas from each section. So I think what I want to do is just ask the room, does anyone have, like, taking all these things into account, does anyone have this cool vision in their head that they want to pitch for, like, what their favorite version of all these ideas together is?
Yeah, what if we took
big
what
question.
if we took the Temple of the Ocean King and just transformed it completely into a roguelike section of the game, and we basically get rid of the recording information is useful. Like, I feel like they do enough of that throughout the rest of the game that we may be able to put that to one side.
But you can't, because it's a pillar of the discussion.
But I think that if we do that, it opens up to these other 3 areas and becoming a way different, better experience where we can really ramp up the tension. We can focus more on mastery and having a new Zelda experience. And in it being a roguelike, it also starts interacting with the rest of the world overall in that big puzzle box-esque sequence. And, you know, maybe there is a way to, like, have recording information be useful there still. I don't know what that is because I haven't played a lot of roguelikes. But
yeah, I was going to say, like, I was basically going to say the same thing. I think the roguelike has just been, like, the central theme we've been revolving around the whole time. But I don't think you need to take away recording information. In a game like in Hades, there's just a big hub town. Oh, it's not really a town, but whatever. Like, there's a little hub area you start all your runs from, and you meet people there and you get more information, and you spend your currencies and so on. It's like, there's no reason that, even if it's too complicated to get notes to take inside the actual dungeon part, that you couldn't get notes in between completing runs that people give to you or whatever. Like, you could integrate it into a way where you would still need to take notes that you then take out to the rest of the world to solve other problems.
I think, well, look, I think it is, I think it makes sense that we would drift towards that, because fundamentally, like, the ideal version of, like, what we're thinking about is mostly being achieved in roguelikes these days. Like, there's not much in terms of, trying to do this while also trying to have static levels is, not the game design direction that a lot of places went, because it's hard. But I do think it's notable that our solution is to throw out the core premise of the DS and what Nintendo was basing the game around, to be like, well, it would be easier if we just got rid of this tricky part. And so it gives me a bit of appreciation, I guess, for the game designers in terms of, like, what they were working around. Because even for us, with all of our ideas and everything, we're still like, we've got...
How do we reconcile these these things?
We're struggling to reconcile the recording information with the making it entertaining to redo it every time. And there's some aspects that I think we would be able to do while keeping the recording information part the same, and while keeping the staticness of the levels the same. Things like the time trials, official speed ranking, etc., in terms of the mastery through repeat play, and the currency and all of that. Those are all achievable without removing it. But yeah, I think it's, that was just my thoughts.
I mean, even if you're every roguelike, or not every roguelike, there are some games that are like, it's very truly random, but I would say that tends to be older games. Like one of the games that I always I grew up playing the Lufia series, and the Game Boy Color Lufia game has like completely randomized dungeons every time you enter them. And they're not really procedurally generated the way a modern game would be, where there is like really smart logic to them. If you had a modern game and there was like important information you really needed to take note of in order to continue another part of the game, you could procedurally make sure that on your third visit to the Temple of the Ocean King, that thing you needed is definitely in there to take the notes. So I think that I really don't think you have to sacrifice any of the key points to turn it into a good roguelike experience.
And the recording information, I didn't bring this up while we were in it, but I'm thinking of the Dark Souls sort of method of like shared information via online services and stuff, where like you can leave notes for other players and all that kind of thing.
Oh, that's an interesting angle on the recording info that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's another way of doing things where you've got the static levels, but it's a shared community experience in solving them.
Yeah. So kind of like going for a roguelike that interacts in a more meaningful way with the rest of the overworld, where recording information is still useful, whether that's through a pin system and having a world that is generated around specific key points that are still present. The maintaining or attaining mastery through repeat play being roguelikes are just generally better at that than what Temple of the Ocean King currently is. Maybe we add some internal currency or some time trial rewards like platinum, gold, bronze grading, and then increasing tension via more enemies, creepier vibes in general, Bellum playing an organ like Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. Just kind of getting those things put together into a more cohesive and meaningful experience.
Yeah, that all sounds good. I think the only thing that I would like to say, not necessarily against the idea of a roguelike, but maybe just a point in the other direction, is that I think one of the things that the Zelda series is really known for is ultimate polish, right? And intentionality of design,
like handcrafted bespoke content.
Yeah. And I do think that a roguelike is, it really does kind of go against that principle just a little bit, because there's a certain randomized nature to it. I don't want to say it's a bad idea. Like, I think everything we're talking about does sound fun. I'm wondering, like, how would it be maybe if the Temple of the Ocean King was a situation where you go into it, like every time you have to go back to it, you go in and there's like 3 floors that are like a more randomized roguelike experience. And then once you get past those floors, you get down into into like the main chamber, where there is an unfolding puzzle area that, like, more of it unlocks the more dungeons that you clear. Like, maybe at the end of each dungeon, you're given like a map tablet that shows you the path to a new area of like the main puzzle area that's static and doesn't change, right? Then it just kind of opens up more and more as you go further and further into the game. That sounds pretty fun to me. I think that's like a nice mixture of all the things that we're talking about. And the thing is that you could, so with that static area, you could have exactly what we're saying, where it's like the more of it that you unlock, the creepier that it is, like the deeper in you go. I don't know. That sounds a little bit more interesting to me, as like a melding of the two concepts.
Yeah. So for me, I am reluctant to get rid of the recording information is useful for, I guess, because, look, Max mentioned at the start, these 4 creative goals are the creative goals that he came up with. They're not necessarily every creative goal, but for me, the creative goal that I think about for Phantom Hourglass, that they were almost definitely working around, is showcasing the unique capabilities of the Nintendo DS. And obviously we're not going to just randomly add categories, but for me, that's why the recording information thing is so directly tied into the game. So I think it would be a shame to come up with a DS game that isn't really built for the Nintendo DS.
Yeah, kind of like putting my pretend creative director hat on, because I've never been a creative director. If somebody came to me with a pitch after this brainstorming session, and it's the designer for the Temple of the Ocean King, and their pitch is, let's not pursue that goal, because if we don't worry about the goal, then I can do all these other goals so much better. Probably my response to them would be to like try to get them to think more about how to reconcile those goals.
Mm-hmm.
I would do stuff like, okay, maybe if we tweak this, you can keep the first goal. Or maybe if we like, maybe it's an ebb and flow where like every other floor is one thing and the other floor is another thing. I would basically push for them to keep the goal. And probably I would also tell them that it's a hard requirement that they can't get rid of, but that would depend on the situation. But I think it's still a good conversation to have, right? Like if someone is working under creative direction that they've been given, and they really feel like there's a fundamental tension between the goals they've been given that make them irreconcilable, that is a very important thing that they bring up and talk through with whoever gave them those goals, because they might be right, or maybe someone will help them look at it in a different way where they can reconcile those problems.
I think that's all fair, and I think this whole exercise has been a lot of fun, and I think it's given me a better appreciation and understanding for how difficult it can be to get this right. Like, man, I don't know, we've been here for probably 2 hours, just a broad storyboarding session. And, we have a lot of good ideas, but then how do you take these good ideas and create a uniform, cohesive whole that works well and can be designed within a certain time frame and a certain budget, and create a good experience for the end user? Like, yeah, this is definitely has been a really interesting exercise.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm very happy with how it turned out. And on that note, we should probably call it a night. Thank you, everyone, for playing along with my experiment here. It worked out.
I think it was a
really
rousing success, honestly. Like, it's, I think the discussion was really great, and I can't wait to export this whole board and just kind of share it around so people can just look at the visual product that we created here, kind of glimpse into the madness a little bit. But no, this was like a super fun exercise, and it is really nice, I think, because it's very easy to just say, I don't like the Temple of the Ocean King, and this is why. But coming up with like good solves for those issues is a whole nother beast, right? And obviously we have like a lot of hindsight represented here as well, and not even just in terms of like, there have been a lot of other Zelda games since this came out, but just a lot of video game history has happened since this game came out too, right? And so that's coloring the whole conversation as well. But like it's just a fun thought experiment, right? And I personally had an absolute blast with it, and I really appreciate you putting it together, Max.
Yeah, I had tons of fun as well.
And of course, I really appreciate our other two guests of the evening, Cody and Josh, for stepping in at the very last minute. This all kind of came together pretty quickly, but I really do appreciate both of y'all hopping in here and participating in this, because it was a blast.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to come back every season and redesign every Zelda game. Pick out the worst part of every Zelda game, and we'll be like, all right, the vigilante design team is here, to beat Nintendo at their own game. But yeah, no, it was a fun time.
Y'all just wait. Next season, the Temple of the Ocean King is going to be a rhythm game. The season after that, it's going to be Tetris.
Yeah, this has all been really fun because we've got this board thing where Cody and I just get to goof around the whole night. So,
don't sell yourself short. Legitimate points were made in between the goofing, which was substantial. Awesome. I think that this pretty much has us ready to wrap up at this point. It's about midnight in Texas, and I know that Matt and Josh and I at least are all probably pretty beat. And Max, you're coming up not far behind. Cody, you've got the whole day left to go.
Oh yeah, so. No, I'm happy to go record for another 9 hours if you want.
Yeah. Cody's bedtime is so far away. But obviously we'll be catching up with each and every one of you very soon as we get into season 10 and start tackling Twilight Princess. That's assuming that I can ever actually get my Steam Deck set up to run the game, which was a source of extreme frustration for me today. So
yeah, we'll figure it out.
Anywho, yes, but we'll get there. It's going to be tons of fun. We have that coming up on the horizon. Y'all, again, seriously, thank you so much. We'll talk to all of you again super soon. And like we said, look forward to seeing images of this Miro board in the Discord and on our socials. And I'm sure that the Discord crowd is going to have a lot of fun picking this thing apart because there's some real gems in here. But until next time, to all of our wonderful co-hosts of the evening, y'all are great. We'll talk to y'all again soon. Alrighty, let's get into the outro, close this one out for the night. If you enjoyed today's show and you'd like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it is not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show. That makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our thoughts on the introduction chapters of Twilight Princess. We would love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. Twilight Princess can be played on the Nintendo GameCube. It can be played on the Wii. Its HD remaster can be played on the Nintendo Wii U, and it is also able to be emulated in a variety of means through a variety of services. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full. May your arrows never miss. We'll catch y'all next time. Sacred Realms is an independent, listener-supported podcast, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Business operations are handled by Matt Willoughby. Our music is generously provided by Darknuck and is available to listen to on Spotify. Finally, we'd like to thank Nintendo for continuing to create such exceptional and innovative experiences.